Do you know what's truly strange? An entire generation grew up believing they were meant for something more. They were told they were special, that they could become anything, that the world was waiting for them, and they believed it. So they worked harder than expected, followed every rule, did everything they were told would lead somewhere. And yet somehow, they ended up unable to afford the life that once seemed normal just one generation before. That's not just bad luck. It feels more like a psychological experiment no one agreed to join. This is about millennials, people born between 1981 and 1996. And before you think this is just another generational discussion, stay with this idea for a moment, because it becomes uncomfortable very quickly. This was the first modern generation told they could go further, and ended up doing worse than the one before. But the most important part isn't money. It's what that does inside your mind. Because imagine this, you spend your entire life hearing that you can be anything, that if you work hard enough, you will make it, that the world is full of opportunity waiting for you. And then you step into reality, and nothing quite fits. You try harder, but it doesn't arrive. You move forward, but it doesn't feel like progress. You achieve things, but they don't last. And no matter what you do, it never feels like enough, even when objectively, it should be. Without realizing it, you begin to live with a constant sense of contradiction. Psychology has a name for that, cognitive dissonance. But in simpler terms, it's what happens when you're forced to hold two truths that don't align. And this generation doesn't just experience it, they're surrounded by it. But this isn't only about money, or housing, or not being able to buy a home. It goes deeper than that. Because researchers have found something unusual. This generation scores higher in traits like self-focus and individuality, but also higher in anxiety and depression. In other words, a generation that was taught to feel special while also feeling deeply insufficient. Like being trained to shine, but never to feel like you are enough. It creates a strange emotional state, functional on the outside, but internally conflicted, like carrying unresolved tension while still needing to move forward. And that contradiction didn't happen by accident. It makes sense when you understand how they grew up. They were raised with encouragement, constant reassurance, messages that told them they mattered simply for existing. It wasn't done with bad intentions. It was an attempt to do better. But no one fully understood what would happen next. Because just as they stepped into adulthood, the world changed. The financial crisis of 2008, a completely different job market, rising costs of education, unstable employment, new rules for a game they had already learned differently. And the impact wasn't just economic, it was psychological. It's like preparing your entire life for a path only to discover it no longer exists. And while all of this was happening, something else appeared. Social media. Platforms where identity is not only lived, but displayed. This generation didn't grow up with it as children, but they grew into adulthood alongside it. They learned how to exist while also learning how to present themselves, to compare, to measure, to constantly evaluate where they stand. And the research is clear. When your sense of value depends on external validation, your mental health begins to suffer. And that's exactly what these environments train. Without noticing it, life starts to feel like a performance. As if everything needs to prove something. As if someone is always watching. As if your life needs to justify its worth. And the worst part is, it never ends. Now add something else to that. The traditional markers of adulthood, stability, home ownership, long-term security, are no longer easily accessible. It's not that people don't want them, it's that they're increasingly out of reach. So something unusual happens. People in their 30s, even 40s, feeling like their life hasn't fully started yet, as if they're waiting for something. But the waiting never ends. And living like that creates a specific kind of tension. Your body stays alert, preparing for a future moment that never fully arrives. Like being stuck in a loading screen where the percentage never reaches completion. Watching others move forward while you feel suspended. But there's something even deeper. There was an implicit promise. If you work hard, things will work out. For a long time, that idea held true. But by the time this generation tried to apply it, it no longer worked the same way. Education became more expensive. Income didn't scale the same way. Stability became fragile. And when reality breaks the model you were taught to trust, your mind doesn't ignore it. It adapts. It reconfigures how you see everything. That's why this generation often feels contradictory. They still believe things should be fair, but no longer expect them to be. Idealism mixed with realism. Hope mixed with doubt. Even their relationship with work reflects this shift. They're often criticized for changing jobs, for not being loyal, but the environment changed first. Stability disappeared. Long-term security faded. Companies stopped offering what they once did. They didn't break the system. They adapted to it. And that's a rational response to an unstable environment. Still, there's something important that often gets overlooked. This is one of the most educated, most connected, and most aware generations in history. They grew up with access to information. They question more. They see more perspectives. They notice inconsistencies. But when you question systems that were never designed to be questioned, you don't look insightful. You look difficult, or excessive, or too much. They also changed something else. The way we talk about mental health. They normalized conversations about anxiety, depression, therapy. That's not small, that's significant. But they did it while living under more pressure, more uncertainty, and more constant comparison. So something paradoxical happens. They are more aware but also more overwhelmed. And when you look toward the future, that feeling doesn't necessarily ease. If anything, it expands. Climate uncertainty, global instability, continuous crises, and at the same time, they're told they're responsible for fixing it. Without full control, without sufficient resources, just responsibility. And that weight accumulates. So when you put everything together, high expectations, unstable reality, constant pressure, endless comparison, identity still forming, and an uncertain future. The question isn't, why are they exhausted? The real question is, how could they not be? This generation isn't failing. They're responding to a world that changed without warning. They're trying to move forward using a map that no longer matches the territory. And when you keep moving, but nothing aligns, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means the path itself has changed. And that would exhaust anyone.